the thing is, when you're 12-0, November is a lot of fun, and you've got a ton of stuff to talk about. October, November, the whole way through. The past 2 months has been hell on earth. Like, it's been really tough trying to spend 3 shows a week talking about Florida State, because you're basically just beating up on them every week. We kept talking about it. We need something to signal a change, something that we could actually talk about. So with these firings, you know, love Ron Dugans, love Alex Atkins, Adam Fuller. They're all great people. But you had to send a signal to the fan base, to the boosters, that you're going to get this thing fixed, and like really for us to have something to report on. So now that that's here, and it's a couple weeks, we're going to be National Signing Day, the portal opening, the lawsuits. You got February 5th coming down the line. So super, super exciting, and a breath of fresh air to have some of these conversations again.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point because, this is a job and a situation in the public eye. So this is not like you're running an insurance agency and somebody's not doing their job well, so you fire them. This is all about basically, in addition to evaluating whether this person's a good coach, if it all went south and they're part of the mess, and sometimes it just comes to a place where these guys can still be good football coaches that move on to somewhere else and pick up their careers and have done a good job here at Florida State. But there's a public portion of this. There's a public component that you have to show your fan base that, hey, we are making changes to get better, to move on. And it's just not working right now for whatever reason. We're not going to try to figure it out to the nth degree. Just let's start over. And that's where they're at, obviously, with the dismissals of Alex Atkins, Adam Fuller, and Ron Dugans. I certainly want to give you the room, George, to talk about any of that if you want to address any of that. We did go live with James when that story broke, but certainly if you have anything before we move on to say about those three individuals.
Oh yeah, man. There's plenty of meat on the bone. I had James on last night with me and Jen and Deshaun, and kind of to what you alluded to. These guys getting fired isn't affecting their livelihood. Like, you know what I mean? It's not like, a CPA gets fired and he's got this big mortgage and all. Unless they're living well above their means, they're going to land on their feet. All of them go their separate ways, probably land on staffs and be great. If you look specifically at the offense, that even relates to Mike Norvell. There's all this talk about whether he's going to keep play calling, whether he's going to give it up. If he brought in another Alex Atkins, somebody like that to run his offense, it just, from the outside looking in, it's going to take 3-4 years to get this thing turned around. The biggest thing is to get new eyeballs in there, really kind of just scrap what you were doing it and get something new. I think the pressure of like 247 on 3, finally starting to call for people's jobs and write those type of articles. It's fine when me and other people do it, but when they start doing it, the pressure's on. Like, if you're FSU's administration, if you're Mike Norvell, you have to look at all these podcasts and platforms and what they're talking about, just hammering you, and they don't understand what's going on. If anything, you fire these guys, and now there's a different narrative. There's something to talk about. There's some hope for the future. And like, I love Ron Dugans. He's a legend at FSU, one of the greatest wide receivers they ever had, clutch game maker, all those things. So do you think I want to get on my show 3 times a week and denigrate, his ability and what he's doing? No, I don't. But as you said, it's result based. And, there's a lot of different rumors about who will possibly come in, this and that. Like, to me, the only possible way that Mike Norvell continues calling the plays, or even going back to the way it was with Dillingham, where it's a lot more 50-50, Mike just kind of has the final say, would be somebody like Brian Hartline, because he's just such an amazing recruiter. And, he could get all the, you would have the best receivers in the country within a couple of years if you got Brian Hartline, if it worked. Outside of that, when you're talking about coordinators, I think it's pretty much a consensus amongst most people. Bring in somebody, and you're just going to have to let them run the offense. You're going to have to bring in somebody, a fresh set of eyes, get this thing turned around. Everybody's talked about the UNLV guy, Brendan Marion. Love him. He could be a good first choice. One of the more popular scenarios we came up with on the show last night was bring in Mullen on offense and Muschamp on defense. You could almost hire those guys immediately. Muschamp, I don't know if he would, he's probably going to stay with Georgia, but he's an analyst. Like, I don't know about Muschamp, because the reason he supposedly took that analyst job was because he wanted to spend more time with his family. I don't know if there's somebody sick, if it was just a limited time. But, names like that come in and you just know they can recruit. They've got a track record. You know they can coach them up. But yeah, outside of that, it's tough with a lot of these other names that you're talking about that are up and coming. But it's just exciting, just to have the conversation finally. And the fact that he's committed to changing, he will give up play calling. They did do the 2 coordinators. So yeah.
It's a couple of interesting names you just came up with, and I don't have the numbers, the win-loss records to back this up, but based on just my off the top of my head recollection, most teams that have guys that were successful or at least decent, in their case, you could make an argument how successful they were as head coaches. But anyway, head coaches at a big time level that are coordinators on a football team, that those teams do extremely well.
Yeah.
You've got that much coaching experience and know-how in one room, and you've got 2 guys that they both coached 2 SEC programs in the past as the head coach. Wow, that's a lot of knowledge and experience in one room.
And it takes care of the yes man issue and the not being able to trust in the rumors and things behind the scenes. Like, Dan Mullen isn't going to back down off something if he thinks he's right or whatever. Like, ultimately, Mike will be the final play caller, but he'll go back and forth with him. The same thing as Muschamp. These are fiery guys. These aren't guys that came up that Mike pulled up by their bootstraps, through his career and things like that. Given an opportunity from Charlotte, having Fuller on multiple staffs, it'd be a little different. People want to say that, oh, Dan Mullen, he got fired because he couldn't recruit. Well, I don't know. He recruited, every recruiting class he ever had was better than anything Mike Norvell ever landed, according to the rankings. Now, I will say that, yeah, those last couple classes, he had like 10 guys who were either couldn't qualify or never made it. So those were a little overinflated. But we're not talking about making Dan Mullen the head coach, folks. We're talking about offensive coordinator. What did he do as offensive coordinator? Yeah, Tim Tebow, all that. And, he immediately fixed that offense when he got to Florida. He got AR in there, all those things. So I would be more than happy with him. And I think as an offensive coordinator, not as a head coach that has to divvy up all these responsibilities and be part over the entire recruiting effort. I think if you have Dan Mullen as OC and you fill out that staff, like, what quarterback is Dan Mullen going to walk into your house and you're not willing to give it a shot? Pretty good track record.
No, it's a great point. Interesting names right there. Is anybody else being bandied about that you think is pretty reasonable and that you would be optimistic about?
Yeah, it's tough because, people talk about Tino Sinceri, like Joe Craddock from Tulane. Those are all up and coming coaches. I could see it working out, but it's just scary given the situation. Like, I would feel so much more at peace to have a coordinator that has proven it at the highest level, but there's not many of them left. There really aren't. So, yeah, there's a ton of names. I think the most likely is going to be Brennan Marion, just to be totally honest. It's really tough until the season ends,
Yeah, because I think that there are 2 different paths to go on the offensive side, because obviously Mike Norvell got this job because he's an offensive guy that's been successful. That's his calling card. Most head coaches across the country have a calling card on one side of the football. It takes years and years of great experience at the highest level to where we don't think of somebody being either an offensive guy or a defensive guy. Nick Saban, well, he's originally a defensive guy, but nobody anymore thinks of him as a defensive guy because he's just the greatest coach of all time. Urban Meyer, no longer either offense or defense, just a great head coach. But most guys, while they're still developing their careers, they're looked at as, well, Manny Diaz, he's a defensive guy. Mike Norvell, offensive guy, etc. So if they hire a Dan Mullen or somebody of that level of status, you would think that he would have control of the offense. Again, Mike Norvell has final veto power versus hiring somebody else that's more of a assistant offensive coordinator, and it's still Mike Norvell's offense. He's still calling the shots, calling the plays, and doing everything. And that guy is just a coordinator during the week, and some like an assistant, almost a developmental offensive coordinator.
It's a hard sell. And that's been the biggest point I've made. Like, who's going to be willing to do that? You're going to come try to be a part of a turnaround from a 1-11 or 2-10 team, whatever it ends up being. You risk all that and you're not even calling plays. That's kind of why at the beginning I said Brian Hartline is about the only person on earth I could see that working, because they could give him the actual OC title and you know what he's going to do recruiting. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. The Brennan Merriam one, the why it seems the most likely is because there's a lot of similarities. It's a little different. It's more like Gus Malzahn's offense at Auburn with that spread, but a lot more running the ball. I think it's, in my opinion, the ship has sailed. I think Mike's pretty much ready to give up the play calling. But if you don't get the right guys, like the first go round, the reason the staff is the way it is they missed, like most of the guys on the staff were a second or third choice. Lanning ended up going here. Silverfield stays at Memphis. There were so many names that we wanted and didn't get that you've got to hope the administration is ready to like really pay up and go get some guys. But yeah, you would like to, as Mike Norvell being an offensive coach, like just go get the most amazing defensive coordinator and let them handle it. But just how far bad this season went and such an anomaly that it was, to me, if you did that, what you just alluded to, like I don't see how it gets fixed outside of like 2 or 3 years. It's tough to see it happen when you've already seen the initial climb from 20 to 21 to 22 to 23, what it took. And Mike Norvell doesn't have that kind of time. I think it's almost like, it's like this. I know you've heard this before. Anytime you're going to train somebody at karate or horse riding lessons, they always say, I'd rather you not know jack and have no bad habits than, you've been doing it by yourself for 3 years and I got to try and reteach you everything. It's kind of where we are with this offense, man. Like they didn't have any answers. They couldn't understand. All they could come up with is, well, we misevaluated it. But, maybe you could get some fresh eyes and keep the same offense and they could find the issues. But that process just seems like it would take a long, long time. So I think that's why most people want somebody to come in with a fresh system, learn it from scratch, which principles in football are the same everywhere. But I think you're picking up what I'm putting down.
Absolutely. And you bring up Will Muschamp. And for anybody out there that is of a certain age that maybe they've only been watching football for 5 or 10 years or something in that range, and Will Muschamp doesn't necessarily impress you. Yeah, he didn't have necessarily the greatest run at South Carolina, especially at the end. However, to a certain degree, he had success at Florida and he had success at South Carolina early in his tenure. But the thing is the guy is considered to be one of the best defensive coordinators in all of college football. When he was on his game and before he became a head coach, he was considered one of the best. You mentioned his family situation. I would have to dig into it to see how old his maybe it's a situation, like you said, where there's a health situation in the family, or maybe his kids were getting through junior high and high school, and maybe he's past that and he's ready to get back in there full throttle. I don't know, but that would be a tremendous addition. Again, separate the head coaching record versus the reputation as a defensive coordinator, because again, he was one of the best.
Yeah, and also with that, an absolute monster at recruiting. I mean, recruiting wasn't ever his issue. He did damn good at South Carolina and he did good at Florida for those defenses. So yeah, I could, I would love that. It's just kind of tough. It's hard to know, like you said, with the family situation, but I 100% believe they would reach out to him, reach out to Dan Mullen. Both the Indiana coordinators, I can't remember their names for nothing. Tino Sinceri, I remember, but the defensive coordinator, I can't remember his name for anything. He's a candidate. There's not many of those names that are just, known names. There's an offensive line coach from Stanford that people are looking at. It's tough.
I'm not familiar with the Indiana defensive coordinator. I just looked him up, Bryant Haynes, but I'm not familiar with his work.
Like there's not many people that are like, and that's what's so tough about this until the season ends. Like they're all retired. Like all the coaches we grew up, the people you know that have done it and this and that, there's not many people that you can take that is just successful and done it at the highest level that you can bring in outside of those names. So it's tough. You're not gonna. You almost have to do the G5 thing, and that's where it gets into Brennan Marion, et cetera, et cetera. But we'll see.
Derek Mason was an excellent defensive coordinator. Then
Oh,
he
yeah.
elevated to a head coach, and then he ran around to Vandy, and then I think
What's he doing since he lost the Vandy job? I'm not
yeah,
sure.
I think he's at like Middle Tennessee. No. I'm not getting the exact group of 5. I'll look him up, but he went somewhere as a head coach. And again, I'm forgetting where he went. Derek Mason is, yes, I got it. I was right the first time. Middle Tennessee head coach just this past season was his first year after he was at Oklahoma State, Auburn, Vandy, of course, as the head coach.
Yeah, another name that has been floated out there that I think has cooled off a bit is Derek Nicholson from Miami, Florida State alumni, great guy. Pretty sure the past 2 years he would have jumped at the opportunity to come here and be linebacker coach. But now it's in more of a position, kind of like I said, do you give a guy an opportunity? Do you upgrade a guy from this and that and give him, I'm not sure. The way Miami fans are talking about their linebackers and how they're trending, I'm not sure. But yeah, that's another name to look at. I would love to have him, but it's tough. It's all on the line. So I guess that's why the Muschamp name is so appealing to me, because I can't think of another name that I would just be like 90% confident it would work out. Unless you're talking about taking Glenn Schumann or something like that from Georgia, but it's not going to happen. So.
Yeah, I've not given it any thought, but yeah, I'll kind of survey the nation here maybe over the next week and see what we come up with. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football, everyone. We get together with George each and every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. It's Georgitis, and it's the Renegade Report. So please get on over there, check out the latest there with all these Florida State changes. And George and the crew got together last night, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So check that out.
My bad. Go ahead.
Go right ahead.
No, I was just going to say, the names are fun, but right now that is really just like kind of wild speculation. You get rumors, you hear from people they've contacted. I know, won't say any names, but I know they've contacted several NFL coaches, had conversations.